it wasn't that many decades ago when our researchers, our scientists, were our modern heroes. They were the Jonas Salks of the world that we respected with such notoriety. And I would love to see that kind of video in our K through 6 and into our 7th and 8th grade classrooms, where we still have a chance to have an impact on kids, to move them into science and get them in that direction. Nominations for the Golden Goose Award come from anyone. Even you could nominate somebody next year for a Golden Goose. They're evaluated by our selection committee and a distinguished panel of scientists, including some top university research officials, review the nominations. And then the organizing committee then chooses the awardees from those that are selected by the committees. Last year, the first Golden Goose Award celebration honored a distinguished and fascinating group of awardees, and as you'll see tonight, and as you saw from the video, we've even gone a step higher this year. Now I'd like to begin the presentation of the Golden Goose. We're excited to have the opportunity to present these awards. Sue, are you going to help me with the presentation? Terrific. Well, the first group to receive the Golden Goose is David Gale, Lloyd Shapley, and ALVIN ROTH, whose work, as we saw in the video, though decades apart, grew from theoretical mathematical algorithms about marriage stability and moneyless markets to school choice programs for urban school system, the program that matches new medical school graduates with their first hospital residencies, and even, as we saw, a national kidney exchange that matches compatible patients and donors from around the country. Dr. Shapley and Dr. Roth were awarded Nobel Prizes in 2012, and though Dr. Gale is deceased, we're also pleased to have his daughter, KATHERINE Gale, here to receive the award on his behalf. Dr. Shapley is unable to travel, so we're also glad that he is represented today by his niece, DEBORAH Shapley. And finally, Dr. Roth. We want to bring you forward. Good picture, Dr. Roth, if you can, we'll get a nice picture here. There you go. Let those Golden Goose take flight. Over here, please. Over here. Right. And you'll have seats at the on the stage. Our next awardee is Dr. John Eng, a medical researcher and practicing physician whose study of the poisonous venom produced by the Gila monster led to a drug that protects millions of diabetics from complications such as blindness, kidney failure, and nerve damage. Please welcome Dr. Eng. Good luck getting those through TSA security. And the final Golden Goose Award goes to Dr. Thomas Brock and Dr. Hudson Fries for their discovery of Thermus aquaticus, which has helped usher in the entire biotech industry and the genomics revolution. Please welcome Dr. Brock and Dr. Fries. I'm particularly fond of Dr. Brock, as I'm from Wisconsin as well, and on behalf of all Green Bay Packer fans, we're grateful for his attendance. Is that in there? Sorry? That offended anyone? What I'd like to do now is to take an opportunity to interview them and let them discuss some of their achievements and their background with you. And what I'd like to do is start first with Dr. Roth. Talk to us a little bit about the theoretical work of Drs. Gale and Shapley and how it led to your work, but specifically, can you describe the moment when you realized that their work, your work, would actually be used for very practical purposes?
Well, the medical match existed long before I started to work on it, and I think I first heard about it in a connection that there was a claim that it was safe for medical students to reveal their preferences in medical match. I remember thinking, that's an interesting claim. I wonder how that works and if it's true. And in the course of doing that, I found that the clearinghouse that the doctors were already using used a procedure that was equivalent to the one that Gale and Shapley had thought about when they thought about marriage. And that opened the door to all sorts of investigations.
Doctor, you, as an economist and still working, are you still looking for new theoretical frameworks that have practical solutions for some of our societal ills?
Absolutely. You know, the exciting thing about economics is we mostly don't understand it.
Well, you're in D.C. right now. Yeah, that's certainly true. Thank you, sir. Dr. Eng, tell us about your work with a Gila monster. I'm sure that's material for Jay Leno and Letterman. How did you even come to think about Gila venom?
Behind every scientist is another scientist, and that is a scientist mentor. Very important. My mentor was Rosalind Yalow. She received Nobel Prize in 1978. And she would ask us every week at the meeting, what's your big idea? What's your big thought? And that pushed me to think about what is a big idea. So I thought, well, endocrine is a study of hormones. I'll look for new hormones. And at around that time, a report came out of the NIH GI group that reported a peptide that had the amino acid histidine at one position. And I had set up an assay to look for HIS1, as I called it. And I found their peptide, helospectin, but I found this other major peptide in Gila monster venom that had never been described before. And as it turned out, it proved to be useful for diabetes.
Amazing. Doctor, diabetes is becoming certainly one of our national epidemics, and the number of increased cases per year is astonishing. Do you see good things on the horizon with regard to research?
Yes, I think, well, there are a number of different approaches. Again, don't know which approach will be most fruitful, but perhaps stem cells for new beta cells, or even something unforeseen at present. That's the beauty and promise of research. You just don't know what will come up next.
Dr. Brock, your work has played a very critical, and I assume maybe a completely unexpected role, just as Dr. Eng was talking about, in the creation of the entire biotechnology industry. Companies like Amgen and Genentech wouldn't even be here if it weren't for some of your pioneering work. What were you originally looking for, and at what point did you realize you'd stumbled across something so much greater?
Well, of course, it went over a number of years, and I have to preface this. The organism that we discovered, there's an enzyme in that organism that's very important in the biotech industry. HUDSON and I discovered the organism, but we did not discover the enzyme. That was done by other people probably 20 years later. the organism that we isolated from Yellowstone, when we described it as a new genus and species and published it in the Journal of Bacteriology, we deposited the organism in the American Type Culture Collection, which is here in the Washington, D.C. area, and that culture collection has bacteria that are available to anybody in the world who wants to use them. All I have to do is pay $5 or $10 for postage. And so when the biotech people who were looking for what we call a thermostable enzyme that work at high temperature, they went through a whole list of organisms that the American Type Culture Collection had. And the one that Hudson isolated, which he called YT1, turned out to be the best. We had no way of knowing that. And, but anyway, that's how it starts.
Dr. Hudson, obviously you're involved in all of this as an undergraduate, probably behaving and acting like all undergraduate students. What was it like to be part of this as such a young guy?
You mean having girlfriend problems, trying to resolve those, and also work in the lab?
I wasn't going to go there, brother.
Yeah. Well, Tom always said that I didn't get to spend as much time in the lab as I wanted because I had a heavy course load, and that was partly true. But you know, as you point out, Paul, there were other things going on in life that actually intersect. But as an undergraduate, to be able to do this was really phenomenal, and I have to credit my high school biology and chemistry teacher for really inspiring me to move in this direction. I worked on life on Mars as a high school student. And so it wasn't so far to jump into hot springs, not literally, as an extreme environment. But that kind of opportunity, that way of being able to become involved in research like that Tom provided, was just an absolute breakthrough for me, and something I don't think I could have imagined without the mentor I had in high school, and then also Tom being the mentor that has brought me along, and that, I'm sure, actually got me into graduate school.
That's great. The two of you have any plans to head off to Yellowstone together for another romp and an adventure?
Well, that would be nice to do, wouldn't it? It'd be kind of interesting to go back and see where all this came from. Actually, I've been back a number of times because I've been on the board of the Yellowstone Association, which is the educational arm of the park. Every time I go there, they remind me, the research people in Yellowstone, that there was a lot of money involved in that Thermus aquaticus, and they didn't get any. But neither did HUD or I.
That's great. Katherine, Gale, tell us about your father's love of mathematics and how he managed to communicate such complex information in such easy to understand language. And did he do that to you while you were in 7th grade?
And far earlier. As a kid, I thought my dad's job was to play games and solve puzzles. And in a way, I think that's really true. That was what he did with his life. He was always looking for what was an interesting puzzle to be thinking about, and then trying to solve it. And if he couldn't solve it, throwing it out to the mathematical world and saying, hey, I've come up with a problem. Somebody else work on this. And he was like that with us as kids, too. So from very little, we had a tablecloth that had a repeating pattern on it, and he'd put a cup over it and say, what's underneath there? And you had to try and figure it out. And that was part of explaining patterns. And then as I got older, there were more games. But he didn't just want to tell us as kids, he wanted to tell everybody. And so he just figured math was beautiful and everybody should understand that. And he built models out of bicycle chains and out of wood to demonstrate things. And then late in life, when the internet came along, he said, I can do something virtual that will reach more people. And he created a website called MathSite. And actually the stable marriage problem is on MathSite. And so you can go on and interactively, playing with kings and queens from a deck of cards, match them up and understand the stable marriage problem.
Oh, that's fascinating. I wish I was a father like yours. As my 15-year-old comes home with the physics and algebra, I say, honey, Google it.
Well, I'm not saying he could teach me.
I appreciate the confession. I feel better. Deborah Shapley, you're here today as the niece of Lloyd Shapley to accept this award on his behalf. But your biography is pretty relevant to the purpose of the Golden Goose Award as well. Your grandfather, Harlow Shapley, the Harvard astronomer who discovered that our solar system is not at the center but near the edge of our galaxy. And your father, Willis Shapley, was a top official at NASA when we put a man on the moon. And many of your other relatives are scientists as well. So obviously you've got the DNA. You've written about science and research and development issues for much of your career as both a journalist as an author. I'm curious from your perspective as an especially close observer of science, what are your thoughts about the current state of science here in the United States?
First of all, my uncles, including Lloyd, always beat me at chess, so it's important early in life to know what you're not. So you learn your place in the family structure quite quickly. And we've all been writers too, so. I think I would like to second David Obie's point this morning that everybody in this room, and particularly the people invested in the science world, have, I think, a very big task ahead of them to rebuild the consensus that has existed in this country for 2 generations in support of federal support for basic science and the applied missions such as NIH and many other federal agencies. I think as a historian, I can say, and everybody knows this, that on the 150th of 1863, we need to note that a Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, founded the National Academy of Sciences. And he also arranged for the system of land-grant colleges and agricultural universities, which have made American agriculture as productive as it is today, spread throughout the country and throughout the people, throughout the population and the economy. So that was a Republican president. You may know that in World War II, there was very strong bipartisan support for R&D that went forward, including the Office of Naval Research. And so in one of my books, I went over the evolution of the funding of federal science. And these applications and the basic research were always together, and they were often controversial, but there was Republican and Democratic support. Eisenhower, a Republican president, with space, military, and reforming science education after study, et cetera. So I said at lunch that I thought as we have fewer people in Congress and in decision-making positions who went through World War II or the Cold War and remember this consensus, I think we have a big job to explain to younger people and the current young adults that they are the beneficiaries of several generations of medical research. Despite the lamentations to the contrary, Americans are healthier. They have many more college opportunities as students are coming here to our universities from all over the world. So there's really a potential benefit that they should understand. We all need to make those connections. So I think there's a job to be done to continue the consensus that we've had.
Agreed. This next area of questioning is a little bit potpourri. If you watch any of the cable TV channels and the talking heads, you know we love to put people on the stage and let them go back and forth. But this is all in good fun, and please just jump in when you've got something to add to the equation. But you know, back in the gold rush days, if you found an unexpected mother lode, everybody would yell, "Eureka!" What do we yell in science when we find something that we weren't expecting? It's usually, "Whoa, that's funny." What have you found funny? What were some of your accidental discoveries over the years of your career that you find funny? Anybody?
Well, I had one instance once. We were working with some cells from a patient that had an unknown disease in this area called glycosylation. That's part of this science called glycobiology, which is sort of a not well-known discipline. It's not like neuroscience where everybody knows a neuroscientist and everybody sees a lot of neuroscience activity. So glycobiology is about sugars, not the diabetic kind that John studies, but other sugars that are involved in cell communication, in integrity of cells. And so there was a cell from a patient. And I'm not an MD. I'm not an MD. I'm a basic scientist. I'm a lab rat. But I happen to be able to have some cells from a patient. And that patient wasn't doing this glycosylation process well. And one of the sugars involved is called mannose. And so I thought, well, maybe there's just not enough mannose. Let's throw some mannose onto these cells and see if the glycosylation gets better. And it did. And I thought, well, I really didn't expect that to work. I mean, that was an idea from left field. That should not really have worked. But you know what? I thought, what if you could do this in patients? What if you could take mannose, which is just a sugar you can buy down at the health food store, and give that to patients that had this disorder? Maybe that would work. And you know what? It did. We gave a simple sugar, dietary supplement, to a kid who was ready to die in Germany. He had lost 20 units of blood. He was on his way out. They had no idea what to do for him. The family said, look, we'll do anything. And the doctor in Germany knew that I was doing some experiments on this. And he said, tell us how much mannose to give. We could tell him that. The patient survived. And now there are 20, 30 patients around the world that are taking this. And we never expected that stupid experiment of taking sugar, throwing it on the cells to work. But it worked.
That's great. Anybody else with a story similar?
You know, I get to study lots of different markets, and I remember when eBay was first formed, one of the things we noticed was that a lot of the eBay auctions had bids that came in at the very last second. And we thought, that's funny, I wonder why that is. And it's led to a lot of work on auction design and how the rules of an auction influence bidding behavior.
Well, they learned that from children who work on their homework, right up to the end. That's for sure. Each of you, what's next? You know, I've had the privilege of working with wounded warriors. I served a year in Iraq and a year in Afghanistan, and I'm passionate about what takes place at the VAs. It's not your daddy's VA anymore. And to see what's happening in bone regeneration and what we're doing for other different things, it's pretty amazing. But as basic scientists, what do you see coming up the pipe? What's next? What's the next great thing? Dr. Ng, can you lead us off?
What I would like to see next is something from the economists. You know, I was raised to think of the federal government makes investment in research. Well, the missing part is having a return on investment. Why isn't the federal government making a return on its large investment? I think that can be built into the grants that are made automatically if something is commercially viable, to have some portion, maybe even nominal portion of returns to the federal government, and that return be used to support research, especially for the young.
I like it. Anybody else? What's the next great thing? What's next?
Well, if we could predict it, then it wouldn't be a surprise, would it? The whole point of this exercise is that we didn't predict these things. And we just did the basic research, and it popped out later on.
I don't think you could say it better than that, Dr. Rock. That is the point. If you could predict it, what would you have to do the basic science about? Hud?
Well, the next great thing may be not, if we don't figure out a way to get this funding situation under control. I mean, the future can look pretty dismal. If, for instance, you look at the NIH budget over the last 10 years, And at least with one of the bills that's pending in Congress now, in real spendable dollars, that will account for a 40% decrease in spendable dollars in 10 years. You cannot make discoveries without making investments. And we are losing our opportunity. We are abdicating our leadership in science. We're the United States of America. I mean, come on. We showed the world how to do this stuff, how to fund science, how to make it work, and to have a return on investments like the world has never seen before. If we don't pull this together, you can't shrink wrap us. You can't put us on a shelf. We got to keep going. And if we lose generations of scientists, the next big thing will not be done here. It's going to be done someplace else. And then we can pay the royalties for their discoveries that we could make ourselves.
Well, I don't think we have any problem with scientists who don't know how to communicate. And because of that, Congressman Cooper ran out quick because there was rumors flying that you're running for Senate right away in California. So he went and got Congressman Peters from California just to put a block up. Congressman Cooper, would you come introduce your colleague to us, please?
I hate to tell you, the House just voted to cut food stamps by $40 billion. So this is the fiscal atmosphere that we're operating in. But we're fortunate to have two of our most outstanding members of Congress with us today. One is a veteran, not grizzled, but a veteran from New Jersey, who's a Princeton scientist in his own right, a truly great member of Congress, Rush Holt from Princeton, New Jersey. Rush.
Thanks, Jim. And I want to hear the rest of this. I assume there's lots more to say. So I'll just repeat a little bit of what I said at lunchtime today with the awardees. First of all, congratulations. Secondly, polish and tell this story. The whole idea of that Jim and some others of us had about starting this Golden Goose Award was that stories are not just invaluable, they are essential. That decisions about funding federally funded, peer-reviewed science won't be made on the basis of reams of data and charts and graphs. The decisions will be made on the basis of anecdotes and stories. It's the way humans think. It is the way you make decisions, it is the way we make decisions. And these stories of unlikely research that turns out to be incredibly, and that word is often overused, but not in this case, incredibly important, are stories that must be told and that are essential for maintaining the necessary support for federally funded, peer-reviewed research. Thanks for doing it.
I was about to introduce Congressman Scott Peters from San Diego, but Congressman Randy Hultgren has joined us, and it's extremely important that this be bipartisan. So Randy, why don't you go next, if you don't mind? We're honored that you're here. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It is great to be with you. Sorry we all were rushing over from votes and had to be involved in kind of transition of the gavel up in front, so I apologize I'm running a little bit late, but it is really good to be with you. I look forward to this event every year. I think it really is such an important recognition, and I just want to say congratulations to each and every one of you. I had fun today, got to do a 1-minute speech, which is hard to talk about each of you, all 5 of you in 1 minute up on the House floor, but to be able to recognize what you have done, and it really is echoing Congressman Holt and his great words that he said as well, that this is so important right now more than ever to be telling how important basic scientific research is. that we don't always know what we're going to discover, but I can guarantee you one thing: if we don't do it, we won't discover. If we're not engaged as a nation in research, basic scientific research, we won't be a nation of innovation and discovery. And you all are testaments to that. You don't always know where Gila monster venom might lead you, but it's going to lead you someplace great if you're just stick with it. And each and every one of you, just so proud of the work that you've done, the work that you continue to do, and the story that we need to tell to fellow members of Congress of how important this is, how science and research directly tie to what kind of people we will be going forward and what kind of nation we will be going forward. The other thing I get so excited about with this award is something else that I'm passionate about, and that is STEM education. Getting young people excited about science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And there's a few ways we can do that, but I think maybe the best is to inspire them, to get them excited about maybe something that interests them that they could be engaged in. If they can catch that fire as a 5th grader or 6th grader or 7th grader, there is a great chance that they're going to stick with science and technology and engineering and mathematics all the way through high school and all the way through college. But for them to do that, they have to see that there's going to be opportunities right here in America for them to be able to use their passion to do the experiments, to do the research that they would love to do, and not have to go to some other country to do that, but right here. I want to be the kind of nation that celebrates that, and that our young people see opportunity into the future. And that's exactly what we're doing tonight, is celebrating what can be done, thinking outside the box, but seeing again that if we have this commitment, great things are going to happen, lives will be changed, quality of life will be improved, and the future of our kids and our grandkids will be better. So all of you, congratulations. We are so proud of you. We thank you for the research, the work that you've done. We want to just be better at telling your story, encouraging young people to follow in your footsteps so that all of us can enjoy a brighter tomorrow. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful celebration tonight, and I look forward every year coming back for celebrating Golden Goose Awards. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Randy. He didn't mention, but he does a great job of representing the Argonne Labs outside of Chicago. And now it looks like our final member speaker is a remarkable new member from San Diego, La Jolla, California, which is itself now a cradle of innovation. It's a remarkable, it's perfect climate, and some would say a perfect Congress. Scott Peters.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here to congratulate all of you, but particularly my friend HUD and Dr. Brock for their research on thermophiles. It was through an NSF grant, and I assume that we'll have some application in helping a San Diegan deal with the summers here in Washington, D.C. But I'll just say, the story I heard, and speaking of stories, Rush, one of the very powerful stories I heard was from across the street from HUD at the Salk Institute, when as a candidate for office, a bunch of the top researchers in my area and in the country heard that someone who might be in Congress was going to be visiting Salk. They filled the conference room to tell me a basic story, the bottom line of which was something like this. You have to be so old to get into a lab to compete for those first grants. When you write those grants, you're competing against the absolute top people in the country. And in the good times, they funded about 25% of them. And today they're funding about 7% of them. So when a kid comes out of UCSD or Stanford or Berkeley or any of our California institutions and thinks about where he or she is going to do their science, they're not stuck here anymore. They can go other places where countries are making those investments, whether it's China, Singapore, Brazil, Israel, England, because they want to make those discoveries, and frankly, they want to feed their families. And so we have to step up. And I couldn't agree more with what you said, HUD, and what you taught me before, is that we need to continue to make these investments and support the creation and these discoveries of new things here. I'd also add that we could fix the immigration policy so that when we educate someone here, we won't kick them out of the country to do their research someplace else. But we really appreciate all you've done. We want to congratulate you on your success. And I know that means a lot to you, but it means a lot to all of us. And we want to thank you for what you've done. And we also want to pledge, at least for my part, and I think my colleagues, that we'll be there for you in trying to continue this great legacy that you've begun. So Congratulations and have a great evening. Thanks very much for what you do.
Folks, before we close, we want to ask the panel one more question. And this is a hypothetical. If ever in the future of your careers you would have an opportunity to make a statement to distinguished members of Congress about the value of federal funding for basic research, in a word or two, what would you tell them? Because we need to give the talking points for their constituents across the country so that the investment in the science hits to the top of the ladder. Each of you, and maybe we'll just start at the end and come this way.
Well, I would tell them that historically, on our moments of national greatness, have been moments when the federal government has funded research of many kinds, basic research and important applications. If you look back to the Lincoln administration, if you look fast forward to World War II, if you look to the post-war growth of research and the education system in this country, the university system, Sputnik and after, and in the 1960s as the entire research establishment grew to group people from all over the world, those were strategic advantages to the country, and they also inspired generations of participants. And we need to inspire and educate again on a bipartisan basis for another moment of greatness.
I'm going to steal a quote from one of the San Diego Tech luminaries who was tragically killed in a bicycle accident here just a while ago. But he said what we have to do is to convince Congress that fundamental research, that's where babies come from. And I don't think you could say it better than that. That's succinct.
I don't have a pithy statement, but at my age, I go back to I started my research career in the 1950s. And it was pretty weak getting support, and then the Russians sent off Sputnik. And Congress made a phenomenal transformation. And they suddenly started funding research in a very great way. My whole career developed in the 1960s, and I was able to follow that great increase in funding with my research. And so it was really quite good. I mean, phenomenal. Let's hope we can have something like that again, because I'm not sure what's going to happen to the people that are starting out now.
We have to remain competitive, and remaining competitive means making it part of our mission, Congress's mission, the investment mission, and investment in young people starting out in research. That's how to remain competitive.
Nice. The Congressman mentioned at the beginning, basic research is a public good. And public goods are like defense and clean air and abundant water. And those are, everyone agrees, the jobs of good government. So
I would say that my father knew what he wanted to do from when he was about 10 years old. He learned about the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and he thought it was beautiful. He would lay in bed at night as a 10-year-old and think about how beautiful that was. And there are 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds and 17-year-olds and 20-year-olds around this country who are making those same discoveries now and who are falling in love with mathematics and can grow up to be our researchers. And we need to invest in their education, and when they're ready to produce research, we need to invest in their creative minds, because they can do something I can't do and probably most of us can't do. And yes, it has practical applications for our lives, and it also creates more beauty.
Well, folks, let me close with this. Right now, in labs all across this country, are very young people, just as HUD was back in the day, that are working on diseases and conditions that may not make it to market for 15 to 20 years. Billions of dollars will be spent, thousands of people will work on it, and it may or may not pass. But all of us are going to need it. None of us are getting out alive. Our children will be affected. Our grandchildren will be affected. Our loved ones will be affected. Disease and conditions is going to knock on every one of our doors, and we need it. And we're so grateful to all of you for dedicating your lives to the betterment of all of our lives. Congressman Cooper, thank you for chairing this great award that gives people who normally don't get notoriety and recognition, gives them a chance to be in the spotlight. All of you, please join us downstairs on the first floor for a reception. It's 30 degrees cooler down there, and that way none of us will pass out. Would you please give one final round of applause for our